everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. It's very early for us here in Colombia, so good morning to those of us who are on this side of the planet. So thank you for joining me today. I'm really, really happy and excited. Thank you for this invitation. Because I think it's a very, very important way to connect. I was telling this to Sonia when we were planning this. So I think it's a very interesting way to just get to know each other and also explore our interests. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll move right away into our thing. So I think you can see it now, right? There you are. So welcome to this workshop slash talk that I called Leveraging AI in Education. So build your prompts and know your expectations. So we're going to be working and getting to kind of like level ourselves in what we know about AI. How do we build prompts? So I'm going to share a few things of like the vast amount of information that you can find out there. So we'll see how it goes. But I hope that if you're an advanced user of AI, or if you're just like starting to explore, I hope that this also gives you some elements and some tools for you to continue in this exploration. So as Sonia said, I'm Isabel. I'm from Colombia, and she already mentioned a lot of things about me. And I'll share it later. This QR code that you see here is my LinkedIn, and I'll share it later with you. And I created this with AI just in case. It's a very fun way of creating QR codes with art today with Canva. So just in case you're interested. All right, so let's begin. So this session, it's going to have a few moments. So the first moment, I think for us is to just like ground ourselves and to just question and explore our understanding of AI and how it works. I think that's very important before we move on into a practice session or part of the session with prompting and getting to know some frameworks. And then if we can make it to the end of the session, we're going to stay for a few minutes to have a chat and maybe, share some reflections on how this is going to, or how this is actually impacting our work as educators. And I think that's a key part of this talk, like everything that we now learn and know and see in the potential of AI. The idea is to know how we can use it eventually, or learn to know how actually this is helpful or not in our classes. So, and then we'll conclude. So let's begin. I have a few proposals for us before we begin, because the group of the Zoom call might be getting bigger. So a few things that I'd like to share. I'm going to talk about tinkering and iteration a lot. So I think it's very important. I don't know in Spain, how do you call this? And I'm really curious, because in Colombia we say cacharreo. And I don't know if it's a very Colombian word, but this will be the equivalent in Colombian Spanish to tinkering. And I'm just curious in Spanish of Spain. You can write it in the chat.
Trastear.
Trastear. Okay, that's interesting. That's useful for me. So I'm going to talk about tinkering and iteration a lot, because this is key in the prompt building process. Like really, we need to work it out and try and fail and try again and be patient. That's a very important thing. Everything that you know, also, I invite you to share it in the chat. Like, oh, I have this link, I have this app. There's so many things out there right now that I think the more we share, the better. That's why we are here as a community. Also, I'd like to invite us to create a safe space. So if we are participating at the end orally, so let's be mindful of other people's time. So if others have their hands raised, I think it's important to listen to as much people as we can. And a final recommendation for you, if you're an educator and you're here today, try to make sure that you have a goal, a personal goal to, get your AI understanding further. So the clearer your personal goal is, the more you're going to get from this workshop, because it can have things that are fundamentals, but some other things that are a bit more advanced. So I think that asking ourselves, what is my goal today with this? What do I want to, do with AI? I think it helps us to kind of like narrow it down and have a clear purpose. So having that in mind, let's move on. So we're going to begin with questioning and exploring our understanding of AI. This is a little bit of an opening for us. And I think it's important because we need to take into account the let's say, the philosophical groundings, the understanding of what this is actually implying for us as a society. And before doing anything with prompting, as educators, we need to know how this works and what are the implications of AI. So I have a few workshops and talks about ethics and the implications of this. If you want to talk further, that would be very, very cool. I want to start with a very controversial person, and whose statements I think are very important for us to stir the debate. So this is Yuval Noah Harari, as you know him, and I think many things that he has said are so interesting, but he has been one of the people who are opposed to AI the most, and he has been publicly, putting his position there because he says a few things that are true, that we actually don't know what is going to happen. And I think that's true. Like, this is so big. This is such a revolutionizing moment for us that I think it is important to know, to have this critical perspective insight. So he says something that I like. He doesn't call AI artificial intelligence, but he says that this is an alien intelligence. And since we are all language, scholars, I think this is very, very interesting for us. Every time I talk to people and they're not linguists, this kind of like passes by very quickly. But I think for us here is a very important reflection. He says that this alien intelligence has hacked our operating system, which is language. And this has created something emotionally in us. This has created a paradox. This has created something like a very exciting emotional state, but also a very terrifying emotional state. Like, we don't know where to be when we are talking about AI. We can be either one and the other. And this is because, and this is the interesting part, since it has hacked our operating system, which is language, it has created an intrusion into our reality through the creation of intimate relationships. So language is so close to us, it's so intimate, and having systems and machines that actually can communicate with us today in such an eloquent way, in such a coherent way, apparently, it has kind of like really surprised us. So this is like the first statement that we need to take into account. Like, large language models, which I'll explain in a bit later, are capable of doing things that are really, really similar and close to what we actually do know. And the most important thing is that it does kind of like reflect the ways we think. And that is very striking. So that's the first thing. So the second thing, and I want to cite here a Catalan philosopher that I really like, which is Marina Garcés. And she says that we are today referring to artificial intelligence as something that is not human for some reason. If you have probably heard some people saying this, like, oh, that's not natural. And that's very interesting because she says, actually, it's not that artificial intelligence should be something opposed to the human being. Actually, it's something that's as human as we are, and because we have created it. It's something that we have, fabricated. So it's very, very interesting. So she says that today we are, as human beings, as a society, as a civilization, confronted with our most outstanding characteristic and reality, which is like ours is not the only intelligence. And I think that's a key thing, because we're starting to think that it's not going to be just about us but we focus everything that's happening about us. So now we have to kind of think what's going to happen with these, entities that are developing and evolving at a pace that we are not able to keep up. At the same time, it is us who are creating this. So this is a very key point as well. So she says that the term nature actually has been used for ages to designate that which was not proper to human beings. So it is very contradictory to say, oh, that thing, AI, is not natural. That doesn't belong to me as human. And actually, it really reflects what we think as humans. And when we talk about the ethical implications, one of the most salient and worrying ethical implications about AI is AI bias or AI biases. It is reflecting the thought of those who have coded it, those who have created the algorithms, and who are in a large proportion people from a dominant perspective and hegemonic perspective of the world. So it is a very crucial thing to keep in mind. Okay, I hope we're doing well so far. I'm sorry if I'm going fast, but I really want to cover everything that I have. So just to wrap up this part of Marina Garces, so she says, okay, we are starting to understand ourselves as one intelligence among others, okay? And I'm going to connect this with the next person I want to share with you, who is Helga Nowotny. Helga Nowotny is an Austrian scholar, and she has asked a question that I think is so relevant. She says, okay, if we're understanding today as one intelligence among others, among nature and humans as intelligence, we have a new species, let's call it that way, although I know people who work in natural sciences wouldn't agree. But I think this question is so important. She would say, how are we going to co-evolve with these entities? And I think this is great. And if you have the chance to come across her book, In AI We Trust, which was published way before ChatGPT was there. And I think it is a fascinating book, because she says we need to really, really be aware of the fact that we are used to operating among black boxes of the world. We have no idea of how the majority of the world works. So this is going to make it harder for us. So the more critical thinking we introduce and integrate in our classes, the better, because this is going to be a great competition to what we do as educators. So we need to know more how the world works now that AI is here, now that we are co-evolving with something else that we don't know yet how it's going to, the directions it's going to take. We're just seeing the beginning, the tip of the iceberg. Okay. All right. So that was the introduction. So we're going to move on to the prompts. Okay. And our moments of practice. So this part is very interesting. Even if you have worked on, I don't know, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, whatever model, we're going to work with a different platform today. And I'll send you a few links for us to work on it. So, and then we'll cover questions and everything that you want to address of the whole talk at the end, if that's okay with you. So let's move on there. So before we know how to address prompting, I want to make sure that everyone knows how this works. And I'm probably, pretty much certain that you have heard or read something about this, but I think it's important, and I want to share an infographic that I think is very illustrative about this. So what is a prompt actually in the context of generative AI, and what is generative AI actually? So a prompt is an instruction or a question that guides the generation of text by a large language model that we're going to call an LLM. Probably you've heard this before. So a prompt should be clear, specific, and focused to achieve optimal results. This is like the generic definition of a prompt. So an example of a prompt that you could enter into an LLM will be summarize the main arguments of John Locke's essay on the social contract in 200 words. So this is pretty much it. So we're going to see what's backstage of this and how an LLM comes to this resolution, to this output. So I'm going to show you right now a very interesting infographic of the Financial Times that I found that was so good. So here it is, and I'm just going to use it for two things, and I'll share the link with you if you're interested, because this is a long infographic, but it's so well done that I think it's worth the exploration. So, and if you're working with corpus linguistics and everything, I think you pretty much know about this already. So the idea is that the LLMs, the large language models, as you know, they use natural language processing. And this wouldn't happen, or this wouldn't be able to, exist if there weren't for a few functionalities of the algorithms that are used. So if you think of the term ChatGPT, actually the GPT part says generative pre-trained transformer, and we're going to delve here into what a transformer does, okay, before the generative part, which is like the generation of the text. So the transformer part, which is the algorithm that is trained, uses natural language processing. So it's fed, it's nurtured with tons of data, right? And that is the ethical part that I was saying earlier, that we don't know where this data comes from, actually. And every company has their own, secret sauce for this. So they have their own algorithms. We don't know, we know half of it already. We know that they scrap, for example, YouTube videos. We know that they explore public libraries and everything that's on the web. And as you know, most of the information that's on the web and on YouTube is in English. So many of the minority languages, many of the cultures that are not as represented on the internet are starting to feel this, this gap. And that's also important. So we take natural language and then we divide it into tokens, right? As you know, and those tokens are going to be very, very important. So they're going to be assigned to a semantic huge net or group of words. And this is very interesting because as we do in linguistics or in corpus linguistics, so they're going to have like certain probabilistic values, right? So they're going to have weights in terms of LLMs. It's called a weight, right? So they're going to be assigned in this weight according from 1 to 0, right? So either if they are very close to that probabilistic, possibility of happening together with some word or not, and we're going to end up having something like this. So a very wide range of possibilities of how a word can appear together with another word in what context. So this is fascinating for us as linguists because we can see it working in real time. So this is what it does behind the scenes, right? So kind of like calculates and orchestrates and operates mathematically speaking, but it does natural language processing. So this is like what it does. And this is what really strikes people the most, people who are not linguists and people who are kind of like approaching it for the first time. It says, this is so interesting. It really looks very eloquent. It really looks very coherent. And it actually does math. It is not understanding what it says. So this is saying a couple of things to you. First, we're very predictable in terms of language use, right? And second of all, like we can be very easily deceived, right? So that's how it works, right? So, well, this continues with many models and how it actually comes to address the results. So I'm not going to share the whole thing of it, but I'll share the link. And you can also find it, Financial Times, how generative AI works. And the generative part is that it takes the prompt, and that's why the prompt is so important, it takes the prompt and it kind of like returns it to you based on that probabilistic, operation. Okay. So now that we know how it works, we're going to move on to what prompts are and how important they are. So prompts are so important that they are also a marketplace. They have become today an item that you can purchase, right? Especially if you work in the arts or design or creative or expressive, areas. For example, prompts to create images, to create videos are so complex. You need so much technical information to create a good image, a good video, that you really need to take some time. And you can actually Google this right now, prompt marketplaces, and you're going to find like stores today of prompts, like $5 per prompt or something. The more complex your prompt is, the more you're gonna be able to charge. At the moment, it's gonna change eventually because now the AI is creating prompts. So yeah, it's gonna become, this is a temporary thing, but we'll see how it evolves, okay? So there are also many things circulating on the social media. And one of them is this kind of thing. You're gonna see a lot of what we call prompt cheat sheets. And to me, this is where this is starting to get trickier for us as educators, because my point, as you will see later, is that we need to know how to create prompts. We really need to learn, because I see them as a problem solving ability, right? So if I know how to create a good prompt, I will know how to solve a problem of what I want, my expectations, etc. So these prompt cheat sheets are kind of like doing half of the job for you. And I think this is not the point of education. Okay. So the idea is not to, of course, you want to make your life easier, but you're going to make it a lot easier if you do it yourself first. And then you kind of like become accustomed to what you want. But if you just let other people get in what you're, wanting to do, this can have some disadvantages, and I'll show it later. Okay, so beware. Do not buy all these cheat sheets. There are many also ways of finding this in the internet. Okay, so now moving on to prompt engineering. So you probably have heard about prompt engineering. So we talk about prompts, how important they are, and they actually have kind of like promoted this area that's called prompt engineering. And it's an area that I think it's not a career per se. I mean, you can be a prompt engineer in any of your areas of expertise, of sub areas of expertise. So it focuses on the development of prompts and the optimization of prompts to efficiently use the LLMs. So everyone here is potentially a prompt engineer in their own specific area. So it's not something exclusive to anyone. But the idea is that as we become prompt engineers, we become better at understanding the capabilities and limitations of LLMs. And this is what's key. So as educators, if I want to extrapolate this to our daily work, we need to know how to do this before we set a policy in our classrooms. So if I want my students to either use or not use AI, I need to know about it. So I need to be a prompt engineer beforehand, and I need to show myself as knowledgeable, even if I don't want to use it. Like my students need to know that I know about this. And this is going to become as popular and as naturalized as Google, like everyone is going to use AI at some point, that it's so normal that it's like using Google today. Nobody questions it. And it's not that, we should question it, but nobody is like saying, oh, she searched this through Google, so I don't know. So this is something that really it's going to become more and more normal. Okay. So here's the part that I was saying earlier. So we need to start seeing prompts as problems we can solve. And I'll show you a few frameworks on how to do this. If we break down our instructions, our prompts into different steps, I think this is a very interesting way of doing it. So what does this imply? The first thing that it implies is that a prompt is not a recipe. Okay, so there's not a single formula for this. Everyone is going to do their prompts differently. And let's see it more as an interaction. Yeah, the more you think that prompting is interacting with an LLM, the better is going to be your relationship with AI. Okay. So, and the reason for this is that I think it's important for us to keep in mind something that George Orwell said. Some people are thinking, and if you teach about writing, for example, if you're the kind of person who uses some kind of text like essays in your classroom, and now you're thinking, if they're going to write the essays with AI, what am I going to do? And I think we should definitely keep teaching writing and learning how to write, of course, because this is one of the most important ways that we as humans have to develop our thought. And if we don't know how to write, if we don't write well, as Orwell says, we cannot think well. And if we cannot think well, others will think for us. So I think if you have been somewhat discouraged of using writing or what am I going to do, think of this. Think that you really need to teach writing. Everyone needs to know how to write before they write a prompt. Okay, so this is a major skill before anything else. I would say that prompting as problem solving comes after we know how to write, after we have acquired literacies. And so I think this is very, very, very important. All right, so what does it imply? So learning to write and iterate prompts involves to better understand our own logic, to refine our intentions and objectives, confirm our expectations, so actually know what I want. I have seen people write prompts that are like this big of a paragraph, and they have like many things inside, many requests, many instructions. And I think if you learn how to break it down, it's going to work better. And adapting your mindset and cultivating patience. This does not work in a one-time thing, right? It's really something that you need to iterate and really like take the time to understand how it works. So, and here I wanted to share with you something that I found that might be interesting for us in the language sciences. So I saw this paper that came out last year, and it says that people's ability to be aware of their own pragmatics, be aware of their own discourse language use can be improved, can be enhanced if we do this interactive approach with AI. So people become more aware. The more they know how they are writing their prompts, the more they become aware that they can have a control over their own language formulations and ways of using language. So I think this is a fascinating opportunity for us in the language education areas. So I'll share the link if you're interested, or you can also track it down in your libraries. All right, so now we're going to move on to the practice. So we're going to need, I'm going to share a chatbot link in the chat for everyone to open. So this is called Chatbot Arena. Okay, so we're going to work with this special bot that's called Chatbot Arena. I'd like to know if anyone here has used it before. I'll be surprised it's not that popular, but you never know. Just could you confirm if it works for you? Because you should be seeing something like this. Right? Okay, thank you so much. All right, never used it, thank you. Great, so I'm glad you're getting to know a new tool today. All right, so I'm going to explain how it works, and then we'll do a short exercise, okay? So Chatbot Arena does a great thing. It kind of like puts randomly many models, many large language models at work. And this random selection comes today, every day it changes. So today it comes from 72 models. So if you go here where you have like here the emoji, you will have all the models that today are displayed in Chatbot Arena. And we're going to kind of like compete between one model and the other. And I'll explain in a few moments how are we going to do this. So you can see here ChatGPT-4, you can see Claude, you can see Grok, you can see Gemini, you can see other versions of Claude, other versions of Llama, etc. So many popular models, but many other models that are not as popular. So we're going to work with one of them or two of them randomly by using a prompt here. So I'm going to now share with you this, which are like the prompts that we're going to use with our let me just copy this and share it with you. We're going to work with prompt A and prompt B. Okay, so I just shared this with you in the chat. So the idea is that we explore. And my question for you right now, and you can share in the chat your thoughts, or you can open your mic. Could you tell me the difference? What differences and similarities do you find in the way that prompt A and prompt B are worded? So what are the differences? What do you see that changes from one prompt to the other? Let's take 1 minute to analyze this. And anyone who wants to speak up or share in the chat, please go ahead. Thank you, Noemi, Sonia, Laura. Yeah, B is much more specific in word limit, target audience, exactly. Yeah, specificity, genre, in particular, specify characteristics of a good output is also defined. Excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah, so we're going to do this. So we're going to start with prompt A. So we're going to take prompt A from the Google Doc that I just shared. You're going to copy it and you're going to put it into Chatbot Arena. So how are you going to do this? So you just copy it, you go to Chatbot Arena, and you go here below what it says, enter your prompt or add image. So we're going to work with prompts today. So you enter there and you click on send, okay? So what it's going to do, it's going to start providing an output, okay? And there we go. Okay, so everyone is going to get a different model. So that's going to be interesting. So please take a moment, enter your prompt, and see what it does, what the output is for you right now. And we're going to talk about very briefly the outputs that we got, how different they are, how long or short or wordy they can be. And also, if you want to share in the chat or if you want to intervene, this is a good moment to do so, to analyze what happened. And what are your impressions if you're doing this for the first time? If you're comparing models, you don't know yet which model it is. We're going to see that in a minute. But if you have impressions also on how this is working, please share them also.
Isabel, may I?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, Miguel says, both answers are virtually the same in my example with Claude and animals. Okay,
Good.
for instance, in my case, it's the first time I do this, and I think this is so useful because I have compared results like manually, like opening different Gemini and blah blah blah. I got the same model as you got in A. I got it in B, and then in model A, I got a really short answer and not a structure and with some examples. So the difference is amazing.
It is. Thank you so much, Sonia, and also Miguel and Yolanta for sharing. Yeah, so one very interesting thing here is that since as you said, the prompt was so vague, the model can give you just about anything, right? So you don't have any control of the output, right? So the more, narrowed down the prompt is, the more you're going to have control of the outputs. Okay. So now you're going to vote now. So this is the critical thinking part. So you have to revise, and this is a great tool for our students. So students have to revise, okay, which output suits you best for your purpose. Okay. What do you think is actually, attending the prompt? Is it actually helping or not? The response is actually helping you or not. I'll share with you at the end a prompt checklist that I have that asks you these questions. And so I'm going to vote, and I'm going to say, okay, and we need to vote responsibly in this bot because this is actually helping. This is a project that does the assessment of LLMs performance. So if I revise my output, I would say, okay, is it according to the prompt that I wrote? So I'm going to say, oh, I don't know, both of them have very different results. I like this one because of this. I like this one because of that. So again, that's how we kind of like develop that model of critical thinking. So in my case, I think this one has a very complete result. I mean, it's kind of worthy, but it helps. I think this one is too narrow for what I think I can use right now. So I'm going to say, okay, in this case, A is better. All right. And it's going to tell me which models at the end, since it was a randomized model, at the end, when I vote, it tells me the model that I used. So in this case was Llamas. And this is, remember, Meta's AI and Gemma. Okay. So do that before we move on to prompt B. Okay. So vote. And also, oh, just in case you were wondering, if you want to continue iterating here in Chatbot Arena, do not vote until the very end that you know for sure that you're done, because otherwise it's going to disappear. So right now our prompt A results are going to disappear. Okay. So here in the chat, exactly. Which one's better? It depends on what you take out of them. Everybody's different and you have different expectations and learning styles. Okay, yes, we're going to see exactly about that. That's a great comment. Yeah. It's a tie for, yes, exactly. Yeah, it could also be a tie, or that both are bad. They're not providing what you expect. That's a possibility as well. Yeah. So we're going to do now prompt B, and we're going to do the same. So if we analyze prompt B, you can see, as you mentioned earlier, that prompt B has some specificities and some target audience and something that's like much more narrowed down. So let's see what it does for us, prompt B. So you need to click on new round where the dice is, new round, and enter your prompt B, and let's see how it goes. And this is also where you see how this is funny, right? This is a very funny thing. This is how it, this is where you see the backstage that I showed you, okay? The refinement of the algorithms, it changes from model to model. Some models are going to be very refined and attend to your prompt, and some others are not. So look at what I just got. So model A, in my model A for the prompt B, which was a very specific prompt, gave me something that was very, not at all good. So I'm just going to directly vote that this was not a good model. We'll see which model it was. But prompt B with model B here worked very well. So it really caught the gist of my prompt, what it wanted, right? And I'm going to say this one's better. How did it go for you? Did you have something as dissimilar as I had? Or did you have, I've had this like in a very also, you know, parallel results. They're not the same words, but mostly parallel. Yeah. Extremely similar, says Amos. Yeah. I got something very similar, Anna. Good. Mine were similar. Yeah. Oh, Gina. Yeah, if you got that, you need to refresh the error model, the error message. Yeah, sometimes it happens. Extremely similar. Yeah, okay. One misunderstood the prompt, understanding its broader meaning beyond AI prompting. Okay, good. So now don't vote yet if you haven't, because here we're going to iterate again. So I used a specific audience. I said, we're going to address an audience of educators who are in a workshop on how to build prompts. But now we can change the audience to something like, so now explain this to a 10-year-old, for example, to a 10-year-old, okay? And it's going to continue there, okay? In their own style, right? So you can start iterating there, you see? So it's going to continue in their same style. So this one is going to be longer. And remember, I voted that the A model was better earlier. So it's probably taken me there because they think this is what I like. Okay. So remember what Harari says. This is creating an intimate relationship with me. It's already like social media. It's giving me what I like, you know, it's not giving me the things that I wouldn't buy. Okay. So the model B tells me something like much more concrete. All right. And I hope it does the same for you. So you can continue iterating there. So I'm going to start, I'm going to vote here. I'm going to say B was better because B attended to my prompt, what I actually wanted. Okay. So as you see, this was the same model that I had earlier. You see the Llama from Meta. And here I have GPT, so ChatGPT o1 preview. Okay, if you see o1 preview is actually the latest and most advanced model of ChatGPT. Okay, all right, so we're gonna start. Okay, I think that time is really going by so fast. So I'm gonna move on really quickly to the anatomy of a prompt, and then if we have a few minutes, 5 minutes before we close for some questions. So I'm gonna explain this quickly, but the idea is that I call this the anatomy of a prompt because, as you saw, if we learn how to build a prompt really well, it will give you very good results. So there are so many frameworks right now on how to build a prompt effectively. So ideally, the key is that you reiterate and you refine your prompt and fine-tune your expectations. And the elements that I'm going to present very quickly, very swiftly, are not magic formulas. The idea is that you have at least, you know, the idea of the components of a prompt. So we're going to start with the prompting guide structure. And the prompting guide structure actually was a guide that I used to certify in prompt engineering. So I really like it. I think it's very practical. And it has 4 elements. So it says that a prompt should contain a context, a clear instruction, an input, and an output. Okay. So the context is actually how I want to develop that prompt and under what assumptions I want to be given that answer. So here's where you say something like, okay, you're in this situation, you have this role, or you're in this space and time, right? Then I provide the instruction and I say, okay, so you're a professor. So your task is this. So write an explanation or explain or describe or create a table or whatever. And then you're going to provide an input. So the input are like really specific information that you really want to take into account here. And my recommendation is that you provide first like the most important input that you can. And if you have a lot of things to like a lot of details, you can also break it down. So this is like specific information that complements the instruction. And the output finally is how I want the model to generate a response. So this is the very interesting part because many people are just saying that or thinking that prompting that the LLMs just provide text, but they can provide also all sorts of format and, as you know, programming languages. And I can even ask them to, if I want to create a routine, for example, in my Google Calendar, I can ask them to create that in that extension. So create this routine of breakfast for every morning in Google Calendar, and you can export that and import it into your Google Calendar, or also for Outlook calendars. So kind of like helps you in many, many tiny tasks, and the output will give you that. So the two frameworks that I'm going to show you later have like the same thing, but with different words, okay? So the second one is PARTS by Google, which is the acronym for persona, aim, recipients, theme, and structure. And pretty much is the same, just that the Google PARTS kind of like divides the context into several things, right? But it works pretty much the same, and I like it. And if you're interested into deepening, Google has a very good course that's called Generative AI for Educators, where they explain this, and you can also practice with a few examples, and also kind of like navigates this in a very nice way. So this is the two Google parts. So identify your role, state your objective, specify the audience, describe the style, tone, and related parameters, and know the desired format of the output. That's the second one. And the third one, which I really like because it does include something that the others don't, is the scribe method, okay? And I learned this from the author himself, from Professor Synapse, in a workshop that he gave last year, I think, yeah. And the scribe method is great because it includes the same thing. So specify, context, responsibility, instructions is the same thing that we just saw, but it adds two steps that I think are crucial, and I mentioned earlier. Number 5 is banter. So we need to interact. We need to have a conversation with the model in order to refine our prompts. And then number 6, and this is great for our students, we need to evaluate with our model if actually is being accurate. Okay, so that's very important. So we can ask the models to kind of like provide, you know, a much more closer self-assessment of what a model could do. So is it accurate what you're providing? For example, some of you might be using references like, oh, can you use references for this? Can you cite the sources? And I have to tell you, like, don't use ChatGPT for this. You know that it provides false information. But Claude, for example, if you use Anthropic's Claude does provide references that are on the web that are actually today that they exist. But we need to be aware of this. So if you ask the LLM to evaluate itself, it has the capacity of doing like a meta cognition of some sort, okay? So this is what Scribe includes that I think is fascinating, okay? So we're not gonna have time to put this into practice. I hope you do, and I'm gonna share this with you, and it's gonna be in our video. I want to stop here so we can have a moment of, you know, exchange and questions, because I have shared a lot of information. So please go ahead and let me know if you have any comments so far, and then we move on to closing with a few recommendations and the checklist that I mentioned earlier. Yeah, I know. Yeah, any questions? I'm gonna move on to the checklist and I'll share it with you.
Isabel, let me just add, for those of you who have to leave right now, don't worry, because we will be posting the recording of the session. So if there are a couple of ideas left, you will be able to watch them online. Thank you for joining.
Yes. All right. So I'm going to share the checklist before you go. So, and we can wrap it up with this. And also, and I have it in Spanish as well, just in case. So this checklist of prompts, you can also use it with your students. And I think it's a great way of kind of like building this AI literacy with them and together with them. So this is a resource that will help you create, review, and evaluate the formulation of prompts. And the idea is that I provided this like clarity as criteria, right? So clarity, veracity and relevance, usefulness and satisfaction, refinement and scope, and responsible and ethical use. So when you're working with prompts, so this evaluate step of the scribe method, the idea is to know, okay, how clear this is, how true and relevant the information is actually that is given me. It's actually true and relevant. How useful and how does it suit my purpose, and how can I refine it more? And what am I going to do this? The ethical implications of this are so important. So I'm going to share this also in the chat. And if you ever, and I'm going to also share my LinkedIn if you want to continue talking about this. I'll be glad to keep the conversation going. So thank you so much for your attention today and your time. And thank you again so much to the ELINET and for this TEL workshop. And I'm hoping that this was something useful for you today. And I'll be really happy to still connect with you. So I'll share my LinkedIn. Thank you so much.